If you're here, most likely you know what React is, so we're not going to dwell too much on that. It's just a JavaScript library that we can use to build user interfaces. Everything is going to be split into components for easy maintenance and scalability. So what are components? These are components. For example, you have your header, your nav, your article components, a side, footer, and that just makes up the entire page. So we're going to look at how to create each one of these individual little components and how to split everything up in React. Before we continue, make sure that you have your fundamentals down. You don't have to be a ninja, but you should know basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you're not really familiar with web development, this will be pretty difficult for you. For you web guys, though, make sure that you understand ES6, since we're going to be, using certain ES6 features like classes, line of const variable declarations, etc. So let's get this React going. First thing we're going to need is Node.js. So let's go ahead and head over to nodejs.org and go ahead and click download for the latest version. After you finish installing it, you can go ahead and open up your terminal and type in node-v to check what the version is that you have. So I have a slightly older version that is currently out, but that's okay. I'll also be using Visual Studio Code for this, so if you want to use Visual Studio, head over to Visual Studio, code.visualstudio.com, and just go ahead and download this as well. So let's go ahead and create our first React app. So this is pretty easy. Once you have Node installed, you're gonna actually use the npx create React app and whatever you want to name your project. So for example, we're going to name this YT series, for example. We're going to go ahead and click run. Now there are numerous different ways to create React applications. Another way to do this is with npm create. Basically what you're going to want to do is use npm to install the create React app globally. That's not recommended anymore. But you could use create React app without the npx. Why is it not recommended anymore? Well, since npx keeps the create React app up to date, and if you install it globally, then you would have to do that manually. So that's how people used to do it before, but it's not recommended anymore. Now, while this is installing, there is a way to create React applications without running create React app. So for that, I'll direct you to this article created by Wishing. It's pretty interesting. He kind of guides you through how to create everything, creating the directory, installing the dependencies, React and React DOM that you're going to need, etc., etc. Very thought out article. There's really no point in me creating one because he did a pretty good job and tells you exactly what you're going to need to do in order to create it. Depending on your machine, sometimes this can take a little bit longer, other times it's pretty quick, but it does have to do everything. It installs all the dependencies for you and everything like that, so we should be, after this point, be able to open up the folder, run npm start, and have our first React application going. Alright, now that this is finally done, we have this page right here that says everything was installed successfully. So now we can just cd into the project that we just created. And let's open this up in Visual Code. Alright, so we're going to open up a folder. Depending on where you installed it, you're going to navigate to that. I installed YT series right there. So I'm going to open that folder, select it. And this will launch everything inside VS Code. So let's take a look at what we have right here. So we have our node modules, which are all the dependencies that are required. We have this public folder that contains index.html. All that we really care about right here is that it has this div id is equal to root, which is where all of your React stuff is going to go into. If we look at the source folder, this is where all your React components are going to go. The main component that was created is app.js, and we're also going to want to look at this index.js. So index.js imports React and React DOM. we can go ahead for the time being and disregard this information right here. React DOM.render just passes one single component to the document, and we're going to retrieve an element by ID called root, which is why I showed you that index.html page. So basically it just says whatever was inside right here, inside this component. So we could pass anything. We could do like an h1 tag, and we could say here, we could pass this h1 tag to the root and go ahead and display it. But before we continue, before we do any more examples, we can go ahead and, since we're already inside our folder right here, type in npm start to go ahead and start the development server. And it's just basically going to start our React application and hopefully display the default React app right here. So there it is. So now let's go ahead and start modifying it slightly. So remember right here, we're including this app.js. So app.js is just a functional component, which we're going to get into a little bit later. And here's all the information that gets passed over there. Instead of passing this, like I said, we don't have to necessarily pass this component. We can pass another component right here, like an h1 tag. And here we are inside the h1 tag. And there we go. And refresh, that says here we are. So again, all it's doing is it's grabbing the root element, which is inside our public index.html, and substituting inside here our React application. So let's go back over here and let's put app back on. And we're going to look at app.js. So app.js is just a convention to name, this app file. This is a functional component. Every single one of these components do need React to be imported from React. If we look at index.js, not only does it import React, but it also imports React DOM. React DOM is necessary just so we can render this application onto the screen. There are also a couple of other features right here, like importing our CSS code, and we also need to import this app.js file from the current directory /app. So you don't actually have to include the extension. You can just say, hey, from the current directory include app.js. If it was in a subdirectory, you would say, for example, let's say the subdirectory was components and app.js was inside the subdirectory. So you can say from ./components/app. Service worker, we're not really going to worry about that stuff right now, but that's all there is to it. Now let's go ahead and modify this app.js. Right here it is importing the logo from right there. So logo.svg just basically looks like that. We don't have to do it. As a matter of fact, we're going to go ahead and delete it. Now, since we deleted that, this is no longer going to be valid. So we're going to just start cleaning out some of this code. Now, this code right here, even though it looks like HTML, it's actually not. It's called JSX, which is one of the reasons why you need this React to be imported from React. So in order to use JSX, you need React. And like I said, JSX, all it is just something that looks like HTML. And pretty much for the most part, you can think of it as HTML. Now, there are times when you cannot use certain HTML attributes. Like, for example, in normal HTML, you would use div class is equal to app to specify CSS class names. But because we're going to be using classes later on, this is a reserved keyword. Class gets replaced with this attribute called class name. So let's go ahead and just remove everything from right here. And might as well even delete this little class name app. So now we have a bare bones functional component. And we also don't even need the CSS document anymore. So now if we save it, it's blank. And we could say blank document. Save it again. And sure enough, there it is. Once this functional component is created, how do we actually get it into here? So we import app from app, but we also need to export the functional component app from this document so that once another document imports it, it can actually know how to import it. Now, every functional component that is basically being returned to be imported somewhere else needs to have a return statement. So within this app function, we also have this little return statement. And within the return statement, we're going to be returning single component. So what does that mean? That means that we cannot return multiple components. So let's say if we do another div tag right here, another div, it's given us an error right here, and it says fail to compile when we look at it over here. Why does it do that? Well, it does that because a React functional component can only return one component. So if we wanted to return both of these div statements, we just have to surround everything by a single div tag. And then if we save it, as you can see, it returns both of the components. That's it for now. This is just a quick introduction to React. We're going to be exploring many more features of React in the upcoming videos, and we'll even come back and break down some of the stuff we covered.